The Andrews Sisters were World War II icons and sold 75 million records, but in 1953, Patty Andrews betrayed her sisters in the worst way possible. She didn't just quit, she sued them, stole their inheritance, and never spoke to them again. But that betrayal was just the beginning. From secret overdoses to backstabbing marriages, here's the dark story of how America's favorite singing trio destroyed each other. The Andrews Sisters grew up in a home where struggle and music went hand in hand. Their father, Peter Andreas, had left Greece to build a new life in Minneapolis. He found work in an ice cream factory, then later opened a restaurant. That's where he met Olga Sui, a Norwegian woman raised in the Lutheran faith. Her family didn't approve of the marriage at first, but when Laverne was born in 1911, they slowly came around. Life was never easy for the family. Before Maxine was born in 1916, Peter and Olga lost their second child, Anglin, who died at just 8 months old. That loss left a mark on them, shaping how they raised their daughters. They poured everything into Laverne, Maxine, and Patty, especially when it came to music. From a young age, the sisters spent hours singing together. Laverne played piano while the younger two followed her lead. They loved listening to the Boswell Sisters, a jazz trio known for their tight harmonies and playful rhythms. They mimicked their idols, studied their recordings, and found their own voices along the way. Singing wasn't just something they did for fun, it became their way forward. When the Great Depression hit, their father's restaurant didn't survive. With no steady income, the family faced a tough reality. That was when the sisters made a decision that would change their lives. They took their music on the road, performing anywhere they could, school dances, vaudeville shows, silent movie theaters. Wherever there was a stage, they sang. Some nights they barely made enough to get by, but their voices kept them going. The Andrews Sisters got their start when vaudeville was on its last legs. They were born in Minneapolis to Greek-Norwegian parents and grew up obsessed with the Boswell Sisters, a harmony group that was big in the 1920s. Their mother, Olga, saw their potential and encouraged them to pursue music. In 1931, they won a talent contest at the Orem Theater, a moment that changed everything. That victory led them to join Larry Rich's traveling vaudeville troupe, throwing them straight into the tough world of live entertainment. Vaudeville was no easy place to make it. Patty Andrews later said performers would do whatever it took to get ahead. Some even tried to sabotage each other. But the sisters took every challenge as a lesson. They learned how to work an audience, how to add humor to their act, and how to fine-tune their harmonies. Those early years on the road shaped them into the performers they would become. In the early 1930s, they started touring with RKO unit shows, performing in theaters all over the Midwest. By then, movies were taking over, and vaudeville was fading fast. Maxine later joked that they must have closed every RKO theater in the Midwest, a reminder of just how many places they had performed. Even as the industry shifted, they kept pushing forward, blending swing music with their signature harmonies. They didn't know it yet, but their big moment was just around the corner. In 1937, they recorded Bei mir bist du schön, a song originally written in Yiddish for a 1932 musical. Sammy Kahn and Saul Chaplin reworked the lyrics into English, and Jack Kapp, the head of Decca Records, decided to take a chance on the sisters. The song came out right after Christmas, and within days it exploded in popularity. By New Year's Eve, it was the most played song on New York radio. It sold over 1 million copies, making the Andrews Sisters the first female group to hit that milestone. But despite the song's massive success, they were only paid $50 because of a bad contract. The song wasn't just a hit. It was everywhere. Its swing rhythm and catchy melody made it popular across the world, even in Nazi Germany, until officials discovered its Jewish origins and banned it. But in America, it launched the sisters to stardom. Their harmonies didn't just blend. They mimicked instruments, layering their voices like a brass section in a swing band. That unique sound set them apart and made them pioneers of the swing era. Signing with Decca in 1937 turned out to be one of the smartest moves of their career. It led them to work with Vic Schoen, a brilliant arranger who helped define their emo sound. He pushed them to experiment with complex harmonies and new rhythms, and the results were unforgettable. Over their career, they recorded more than 400 songs and sold over 80 million records. Songs like Beer Barrel Polka, Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, and Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree proved they could do more than just swing. They could handle boogie-woogie jazz and even calypso. Critics often said their voices sounded like three trumpets playing in perfect sync. Their partnership with Schoen didn't just shape their recordings. His arrangements also gave them an edge on live radio, especially on shows like Glenn Miller's Chesterfield Show, where they switched effortlessly between upbeat swing numbers and heartfelt ballads. During World War II, the Andrews Sisters did more than sing. They gave soldiers a reason to smile when the world felt uncertain. Laverne, Maxine, and Patty Andrews became known as America's wartime sweethearts because their music brought comfort to those fighting far from home. Their songs weren't just hits. They became part of the war itself, lifting spirits and reminding people of what they were fighting for. One of their most famous songs, Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, told the story of a jazz-loving soldier drafted into the Army. It had an infectious rhythm that made it impossible to sit still. Soldiers played it in barracks, danced to it at canteens, and carried it with them wherever they went. Another hit, Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree, captured the longing of couples separated by war. It wasn't just music, it was a connection to home. The sisters didn't stop at recording songs, they took action. They joined the USO, performing for troops across the country. They sang, danced, and spent time with soldiers who needed a break from the harsh reality of war. They volunteered at the Hollywood Canteen, where they didn't just perform, but also served food, chatted with servicemen, and made sure everyone felt welcome. Their energy was endless. They even recorded Any Bonds Today to encourage Americans to support the war effort by buying war bonds. Hollywood quickly took notice. In 1941, they starred in Buck Privates alongside Abbott and Costello. The film was a perfect mix of comedy, music, and patriotism. One scene in particular stood out when the sisters, dressed in military uniforms, performed Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy in front of a room full of soldiers. The energy was electric. The film became a massive hit, earning over $4 million and turning the Andrews Sisters into national icons. Other films followed, like In the Navy and Private Buckaroo, each filled with humor and music that helped audiences escape from the stress of war. These movies weren't just entertainment, they kept morale high and reminded people that even in difficult times, there was still joy to be found. But behind the scenes, things were not as perfect as they seemed. Patty Andrews, the youngest, and the group's lead singer, had a bright and outgoing personality. Maxine, the middle sister, was more serious and business-minded. Their differences led to frequent clashes, not just over music, but over everything from hairstyles to financial decisions. Maxine once said they were as different as three sisters could possibly be, and that the only thing keeping them together was the music. Tensions grew in 1941 when Maxine secretly married their manager, Lou Levy. She kept it hidden for a while, telling only Patty. When the truth came out, it caused a deep rift in the family. A decade later, in 1951, Patty made a decision that shocked everyone. Without telling her sisters, she left to pursue a solo career. The Andrews Sisters fell apart, and for 2 years they barely spoke. The weight of losing her sister to a solo career, the ongoing financial disputes, and the slow crumbling of everything they had built together had taken an immense toll on Maxine Andrews. Just a year earlier, she had been on tour with Laverne, desperately trying to keep their act alive despite the changing tides of the music industry. Now she found herself in a hospital bed, battling personal demons that had been lurking beneath the surface for years. For their fans, the news of her struggles was shocking. Maxine had been part of one of America's most beloved musical acts, the Andrews Sisters, a trio whose harmonies had defined an era. To hear that she was suffering behind the scenes served as a stark reminder that fame does not shield anyone from heartbreak. In 1956, despite years of personal and professional strain, the sisters decided to reunite. The reunion was a chance to recapture the success they once had, to step back into the limelight and reclaim their place in the music world. However, the industry had changed dramatically. Rock and roll was now the dominant force, with young, charismatic performers like Elvis Presley and Chuck Berry taking over the charts. The music that had once made the Andrews Sisters famous, swing, boogie-woogie, and tight vocal harmonies, was no longer in vogue. Determined to adapt, they signed with Capitol Records, where Patti had already established herself as a solo artist. They experimented with incorporating light rock influences into their music in an effort to stay relevant. But audiences longed for the old Andrews Sisters sound, the infectious energy of Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, the upbeat charm of Rum and Coca-Cola. Between 1956 and 1959, they recorded a dozen singles and 3 albums, including a collection of 1920s songs arranged by Billy May. Despite their efforts, none of these projects made a significant impact, though they still had a devoted fan base and continued to perform at top venues, including Las Vegas showrooms and London theaters. Their time at the top of the charts was over. More troublingly, the old tensions between them never truly faded. Resentments that had simmered for years over money, control, and personal choices continued to bubble beneath the surface. The reunion was a struggle, both professionally and emotionally, and as the years went on, it became clear that their place in the music world was slipping away. Then, in 1966, everything changed. Laverne, the eldest of the sisters and the steady force that had always held them together, was diagnosed with liver cancer. She was only 55 years old. Laverne was not just a vital component of their harmonies. Her deep contralto voice had given their music a rich, full-bodied sound. But beyond her vocal contribution, she had been the glue that kept Patti and Maxine from completely falling apart. For as long as she could, Laverne kept her illness a secret. She continued to perform, hiding the pain, unwilling to let go of the group she had dedicated her life to. But when she could no longer take the stage, the Andrews Sisters as a trio came to an end. On May 8, 1967, she passed away at her home in Brentwood, California. Without her, there was no group left to save. Their relationship had always been complicated. Patti once made a striking remark, saying that Maxine had been a problem from the day she was born. She never elaborated on this statement, choosing instead to protect the public image of the Andrews Sisters. Maxine, however, had her own perspective. She described their relationship as both loving and suffocating. The 3 sisters had spent nearly every moment of their early years together. They lived together, traveled together, and performed together, rarely finding a moment apart. The pressures of their fame left little room for individuality or personal growth. After their parents passed away in the late 1940s, a dispute over inheritance drove an even deeper wedge between them. But perhaps the most significant turning point came in 1951, when Patti made the decision to pursue a solo career, without informing her sisters first. Maxine and Laverne were devastated. They continued performing as a group on and off, but the betrayal lingered. Their trust in one another had been shaken, and their bond was never quite the same. Though over here, in 1975 had momentarily brought them back together, it ultimately led to another bitter fallout. This time, the damage was irreversible. When Maxine died in 1995, Patti chose not to attend her memorial service. Though heartbroken, she never believed reconciliation had been possible. She carried that regret until she passed away in 2013. Maxine, in her later years, reflected on their complicated relationship. She acknowledged that fame had shaped their dynamic in ways they never fully understood at the time. She admitted they loved each other deeply, but had struggled to coexist. Their rise to stardom had been rapid and overwhelming, with over 75 million records sold and dozens of chart-topping hits. During World War II, their music had lifted the spirits of millions. But the relentless pressure took its toll. Their fights weren't just about Patti's solo career. Money disputes, management decisions, and personal struggles all played a role. Maxine, in particular, dealt with private battles. Though she never publicly came out, she had relationships with women during a time when such things were rarely accepted. Some believed this made her feel even more distant from Patti, adding another layer of complexity to their strained relationship. Despite everything, Maxine never stopped taking pride in what they had accomplished. But she wished things had ended differently. "I wish I had the ability and the power to bridge the gap between my relationship with my sister," she once said. The story of the Andrews Sisters is one of both triumph and heartbreak. They rose from a small town in Minnesota to become one of the most successful musical acts in history. With over 600 songs recorded and more than 100 chart hits, they left an undeniable mark on the world of music. But behind their dazzling performances and joyful harmonies lay a family that never truly found peace. When Laverne passed away in 1967, it marked the beginning of the end. She had been the force that held them together. Without her, Patti and Maxine's relationship slowly unraveled. By the time Maxine passed away, there was nothing left to mend. The years of distance had caused too much damage. Their music, however, endured, forever preserving the sound of the Andrews Sisters and the era they helped define.